in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Reckless speculation.
Straight talk. Reckless speculation.
Welcome in, Mackey and Judd, which today is Judd, executive producer Declan Goff, and no, that's not Phil. It is Darren Doogie Wolf, who's kind enough to sit in for Phil, who is off today. Channel 5 Eyewitness News Scoop Master, Scoop podcast, of course, for Score North. Always brings us some great information. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Judd. I would take those Phil Mackey management paychecks, if that's possible. I don't know if I would take the show paychecks, but those management paychecks, he's Mr. Manager.
Yeah.
Give me those paychecks. So if Phil wants to toss me a little bit extra for this mini appearance this morning, I'm all for it.
I think for semantics, Dukes, I think it's technically director money. I don't know if I think it's even director money on top of manager. So there might be two things we're trying to poach from him there.
Do you guys want, though? I mean, it might be good pay. I have no idea, but do you want the headaches? I don't want to manage people. I mean, Phil has fallen into the world of meetings. That's hell. Like if I die and God's like, Judd, I didn't like you much, I will be sitting in meetings all day. Forget the fire. Forget Beelzebub, Gehenna, forget all that. It's meetings I loathe. So Phil can have the money because he just does nothing but meet and brainstorm. That's not for Judd, Doogie.
Yeah, no, you and me agree on that. Yeah, I mean, jealousy and envy on the money part, on the, at times needing to be a bleep hole, right? Like, you need to be tough at times, right? Maybe oftentimes.
Rocco's supposed
not
to.
Everybody is going to like you. Yeah, I'm not quite sure that I can handle that sort of situation. So yeah, I guess I understand where you're coming from when you say that you don't want to be Phil Mackey.
All right, topic one, Dukes. The Wolves. Now I saw some tweets last night as the NBA free agency period started about where are the Timberwolves? Did Gerson fall asleep? I give you credit. I remember you telling us several times on different scoop shows, bonus scoop, etc. Don't expect a lot, partially because of where they are with the cap. Don't expect a lot from the Wolves in free agency. So I'm going to guess that the lack of activity that we saw off the start last night did not surprise you.
It did not surprise me, although Gerson Rosas is in Los Angeles, the so-called center of the free agency hub. He's been in contact with agents. Like, they kicked the tires, for example, on Mo Harkless, who ended up getting pretty good money from the Sacramento Kings. Now, the Wolves did not make him an offer, but they're trying to engage different agents in some different scenarios, including Lauri Markkanen. They have talked to the Lauri Markkanen camp. Now, that looks like a sign and trade possibility with Chicago. So then the question is Chicago at all intrigued by Juancho Hernan-Gomez's expiring contract? He's got that option on the third year. So essentially it's an expiring contract. Jarrett Culver, which essentially is an expiring contract if you don't want to exercise the following year option. Would you give up? I mean, here's the bottom line, Judd. Would you give up a future first-round pick for Lauri Markkanen? I think if the Wolves want, there is a pathway to acquiring Lauri Markkanen. He's a restricted free agent, so technically if they end up with Lauri Markkanen, they would be active in free agency. But I think to make that work, I really do think you need to give up a future first-round pick. Now, it would have protections on it. So, how far are you willing to go? Top 10 protection, lottery protection. I think those are some of the conversations, at least internally, that the Wolves are having that Gerson is wrestling with. But I do think if he wants to acquire Lauri Markkanen, there is at least a logical path. Now, it's not like it's the Wolves are bust. There are other teams interested in Lauri Markkanen, but I'm just saying if the Wolves wanted to make that sort of transaction, there is a pathway to doing it.
Would you? Is that the type of transaction or the type of trade and the type of player that you think they need? And because Phil went through a list of 5 available players on the Monday show, and Markkanen was atop the list. And the one thing he said is, well, he doesn't play defense. He can shoot, but he's not going to, despite his size, do you a lot of good inside. Is that the type of player this team needs, or are they so in desperate need of defensive help, Dukes, that it's going to make far more sense if they do make a trade, probably, that it is for a guy who provides rim protection and actually enjoys the art of playing defense.
Well, sure. I mean, if you could find a way to acquire Miles Turner, sign me up. I would take Miles Turner over Lauri Markkanen.
Okay.
But would I take Lauri Markkanen depending on the price? I would. I mean, 40% from 3-point range, 48% shooter, from 2-point range. I mean, he's an elite shooter. I don't have the specific numbers in front of me. It's in that vicinity. The rebounding, if I'm not mistaken, went up slightly this past season. But yeah, I mean, he is a minus defender. Make no mistake about that. He is not a good defensive player. I'm not big on giving up future first-round picks. I'm just not. Maybe it's recency bias going back to last Thursday, but as a really good young prospect, Jonathan Kuminga is sitting there on the board at pick 7. Judd, it hurt me. And I was on the record at the time saying you had to get rid of Andrew Wiggins. It wasn't working here. D'Angelo Russell is Karl Anthony Towns' guy. Maybe you can recreate some of that Brooklyn magic with D'Angelo. I was on the record saying I would have done the deal at the time. But now when it's time to pay up, I'm just telling you, Judd, like it hit me. It hurt me. It did. That the Wolves had to give up a first-round pick and a high first-round pick. And it didn't necessarily have to be Kuminga. It could have been somebody that went thereafter. But I'm intrigued by Jonathan Kuminga based on what I saw of the highlights in the G League and talking to some people around the league. Like that one hurt, giving up a teenager like Kuminga. So I'm not big on giving up first-round picks for non-All-Stars. Yeah, can you convince me to give up a first-round pick or even 2 to acquire Ben Simmons with 4 years left on his contract? Yeah, you could on that one. But on Lauri Markkanen, I would hesitate to give up any future first-round pick.
Dukes, how about this one from our friend Dane Moore, NBA?
Reckless speculation.
And I love this reckless speculation from Dane, who just tweeted this out. No Taurean Prince content from the Timberwolves team accounts, even after the team announced the trade, gives more air to the theory that Prince could be traded again. Again, I think a likely move is trading Prince for a player who makes less money, freeing up more wiggle room. I know there was a picture of him in a welcome post announcing the trade, but this deal has been done for days, and my point is that there have been no highlight package type of content released. That's what normally happens when these kind of NBA transactions does. The NBA is king, obviously, at social media and just interacting with their fans. But what about the theory of Prince also then being flipped again, even though he was just acquired for Ricky Rubio here in the next coming days?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not married, Declan, to Taurean Prince. Now, heck, they took some backlash social media-wise for some of those Juancho Hernan-Gomez Spain photos. So maybe they're just being, uber careful, on the tweets and Instagram. But yeah, I mean, the idea of them moving Prince, Hernan-Gomez, I mean, Prince is an expiring contract. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. They are married really to 2 players, although I don't see a path to them trading D'Angelo Russell, but it's 2 players. It's Anthony Edwards. It's Karl Anthony Towns. Everybody else is on the table. Doesn't mean that there's a market for those guys, but like you may love Josh Okogie. Guess what? If another team wants Josh Okogie and there's a pathway to the Wolves improving their front court, Josh Okogie is getting sent out the door. It's just the way it is. So yes, does Prince's contract hold value in that regard? It absolutely does. So yeah, I mean, could Dane be on to something? 100%.
Best guess, Dukes. Do you think that before training camp starts, Gerson makes what you would consider to be a substantial move, some type of substantial move?
Well, I mean, I don't see John Collins landing here, even though the Wolves remain fans. The Wolves would love to land John Collins. I don't see how that happens. I don't see the path to Ben Simmons landing here. So, define to me substantial. Let's just say it's Lauri Markkanen, Judd. Does Lauri Markkanen, is he a needle mover?
No, probably not. I'm probably talking about a trade that would bring you a guy that would improve an area of your team where you need help the most.
Well, Miles Turner would be that guy.
Yeah, right. But that's substantial, I think.
And yeah, it would be.
Substantial.
And you would absolutely have to give up at least 1 future first-round pick for Miles Turner, plus more. I would do that. I think Miles Turner would be an excellent fit.
Yeah. Okay.
I checked again earlier this week, Judd, with somebody in the know. They don't think Indiana is moving Miles Turner. Now, they did end up draft night with a big man, but when you give Rick Carlisle 4 years, $29 million,
yes,
you are trying to compete next season. They feel like they can be a top 5, top 6 team in the Eastern Conference. Maybe you're not better than Miami, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, but maybe you can slot in right after that. Maybe you can be better than Boston, than Philadelphia. So like Indiana is all in on that. TJ Warren back healthy, Karis LeVert for a full year, Malcolm Brogdon, Sabonis, like they have some pretty good talent. So like if you're Indiana, I'm not saying Miles Turner is untouchable. Like they're not moving Sabonis, okay? We know that.
Sure.
You can get Turner, but Indiana wants immediate return. So like I just don't see how Malik Beasley, even multiple future firsts, like I'm missing how Indiana says yes to what the Wolves are willing to do. They're not moving Anthony Edwards for Miles Turner. So like how are you landing Miles Turner? I really struggle to concoct a legitimate option where Turner lands here. The Pacers end up with, you name the package, Prince, Beasley, whomever. I don't see it. I really don't.
Doogie, back to John Collins just for a minute. And obviously, I think I heard the other day they're still not close to even coming to a potential contract extension there in Atlanta. If the conversation's at least, obviously, a unprotected first-round pick, and let's call it Malik Beasley and Jaden McDaniels, is that too much for John Collins, or is that at least some type of starting point in a trade if you were to want to acquire someone like John Collins?
Well, I think it would have to be 2 really good assets. Declan, you bring up Jaden McDaniels' name, who the Wolves love. They're going to feature him prominently in Las Vegas. The league as a whole really loves Jaden. Like the Wolves could have, if they wanted to, the Wolves could have ended up with a lottery pick last Thursday if they wanted to move Jaden McDaniels. I mean, there's a lot of teams that really like Jaden McDaniels. So, like, do I think something like that could appeal to Atlanta when you're talking an unprotected future first-round pick and Jaden McDaniels, so 2 really good assets? Yeah, I think Atlanta would think long and hard about that. If you're the Wolves, would you do that? And are we talking, Declan, a 2022 unprotected first? Could you somehow push that further out where you feel like, maybe after a couple years of John Collins being here, Anthony Edwards in his 3rd year, then maybe you feel like, okay, you're a legit top 8-ish team in the Western Conference, where if you're giving them an unprotected first, it's more like pick 16, pick 15, not pick 6 or pick 4 or whatever it might be in the top 7 or top 8. I mean, those are things you would have to consider. But like, as you throw that out, and if Atlanta can't come to a happy medium with John Collins, with his representation, Sean Kennedy and company, if they can't find that happy medium, and it clearly looks like Atlanta is not willing to offer him the max. So they might be willing to do, $22, $23 million a year, but it doesn't look like they're willing to go all the way to the max. So that might be the sticking point. If you're Minnesota, are you willing to give John Collins the max? Like, he's not, I don't think he's agreeing to a sign and trade scenario without getting the max here in Minnesota. So then have that conversation, Declan. Are you willing to give John Collins in the neighborhood of $25 million a year?
It's tough. I mean, it's tough. I would consider it, but I mean, it's tough. I think also if you could build around, I know this is just fantasy basketball here as it goes through my head, but if you were the Wolves, would you rather have John Collins under a max or D'Angelo Russell under a max?
I would rather have John Collins. It's just, that would be a more tradable contract. I always look at it like, okay, I've got this guy. Can I trade him if needed? Now, do I think maybe there would be one team that would take on the D'Angelo Russell contract? Probably. Would you have to attach maybe a future first-round pick, though? Protected, but would you have to attach a future first-round pick?
Again?
Probably.
Wow,
I mean, normally you need to do something like that to move multiple years at big money of a guy that's, not an all-star. He was an all-star once, but right now he's not an all-star. He's not a bad player, but he's not an all-star. I would rather have John Collins. I think I could probably move the John Collins contract easier than Russell. Like, let me remind people, Philadelphia, I saw Bobby Marks of ESPN, who's my guy. I love Bobby. Mm-hmm. He was great on the draft coverage last Thursday. I'll track him down for a future podcast. My guy. Seriously, love
But you're going to rip
Bobby
him
Marks
right now.
No, and I think
but he was told.
You're going to rip him.
I can feel it coming.
I'm not going to rip him. But if you go to ESPN Insider
Yeah.
He lays out a scenario where he's making the case for Philadelphia agreeing to a trade package from Minnesota. Now, his editor may have just assigned him that and said, Bobby, come up with some, even if it's not super realistic, at least makes the readers think. And so his idea was Russell, Beasley, and 2 future first-round picks with top 5 protection, 2022, 2024. Maybe it was top 7 protection, but it was definitely some protection. It's not like it was an unprotected pick in 22 and 24. I'm just telling you, like, until I hear otherwise, I don't have a sense at all that Philadelphia has any interest in D'Angelo Russell.
All right, on to the I guess depressing story in town this week. That would be the high hopes that we've had for the Vikings, and then comes this story from our friend Chad Graff of The Athletic this morning, with Kirk Cousins already in quarantine for 5 days, which is going to end on Thursday because of exposure to COVID. The Vikings, according to Graff, entered training camp with one of the lowest vaccination rates in the National Football League. A source told The Athletic on Monday at least 5 projected starters, according to that same source, have not been vaccinated. Clearly, that involves Cousins. Thielen, unless he got vaxxed, came out during the springtime and said he's not vaxxed.
Judd, I was with Thielen.
Yeah.
What was that?
July, and you said he's not vaxxed. Yeah.
16th or 17th. So that was at Woodbury High School. Unless something changed from that day, that now, he got the first dose of Moderna, Pfizer, whatever.
Right.
Unless something changed from July 17th, I don't think he is. Now, it's possible. Maybe he got to TCO Performance Center and, heard some more people and maybe he was convinced. But until I hear that, I don't think so. So I think Chad's on to something. It's at least 5 starters. I also think I know of 2 guys that maybe you wouldn't consider starters, but that are going to play plenty of snaps. So I think the number is closer to like 7, maybe 8. But I'll also add, Judd, I tweeted a couple weeks ago. Now, this could have changed once they got to Egan, reported. But I was led to believe, I tweeted it, so it's on my Twitter page from mid-July, that I'm led to believe the Vikings are somewhere closer to the middle of the pack, not bottom. Like, there's 5 teams. Dr. Sills of the NFL came out. There's 5 teams, and Washington's on the record pretty much saying they're one of the 5.
And then
there's
Colts
5
are too.
teams. Yeah, the Colts.
Yep.
There's 5 teams at the very bottom. Like, I don't think the Vikings are like there, but Chad may be onto something with maybe they're 6th or 7th or 8th. That's still pretty rock bottom if there's 22, 23 teams in better shape than you are. I saw Matt LaFleur, the Packers coach, came out on Monday. He said he didn't name names, but he said we have 11 players that are not vaccinated. I'll tell you this. I have a strong belief that the Vikings are at a number higher than 11.
All right. So that being said,
not way higher though, Judd. Not way higher, but higher than 11. We know Nate Stanley. There's at least 1 or 2 other guys that you wouldn't at all consider 53-man roster guys.
Mond we thought was, and he was not. It turns out. So, but the point is, it's not the number. That's a big deal too. But the problem is the players. Among the group of guys who came out in the spring and said that they weren't vaccinated, I think they had no attention to Harrison Smith. Now, you've been reporting for a while on the status of his contract negotiations because he's in the last year of his contract. Until now, Zim and the Vikings have loved him because he's a great safety. What's your guess on how much this might impact things? Because I am guessing that if players are anti-vax completely, that's going to, in at least some instances, Dukes, change the relationship between the player and the team potentially.
Sure, but he went on the record approximately June 16th, June 17th, mid-June, after one of the mini camp practices. He was asked the question, and kudos to Harrison for being transparent, for answering it directly as opposed to Kirk Cousins and some others. Harrison Smith said, he went on the record, he was asked, are you vaccinated? He said no. I'm led to believe that the Vikings, since that point, now I don't know if it was July 8th, July 26th, but that the Vikings made him an extension offer. Now, it was backloaded, so it may not have been a great offer, but that they made him some sort of extension offer. So would that fly in the face of what you're laying out right now?
It probably does, but the thing is, the thing about this is that the whole thing that began Saturday with Mon testing positive, Dukes, for COVID, and then since he was in the QB room with Cousins and Stanley who weren't vaxxed, Zimmer on Saturday, as I was talking to Royce about, seemed frustrated and pissed off. But I mean, he was frustrated. The guy at the podium yesterday seemed absolutely befuddled by how all of these guys, and I think that there were talks about you should be vaccinated, but Doogie, until now, there was not a warning shot of sorts. Like, this is actively saying this could happen on a Sunday. And right now, Jake Browning and Case Cookus are throwing passes. So I think that this has probably changed the team feels about this, because it's one thing to say you should get vaxxed. And the guy's like, well, yeah, but I'm not sick and I'll be cautious. And you're like, okay. And then, the guy's exposed, and this league is looking to actively hammer players. And we can debate that, but that's a fact. They're looking to actively hammer the non-vaxxed players. So I just think that this might change now, because we are seeing what could happen. There is a chance, Doogie, that on a Saturday night or a Sunday, someone tests positive, there's close contact, and Kirk Cousins is then ineligible for the next 5 days. So he's out. That could be the Packer game, the Bear game. I don't know. But I mean, Zimmer now seems just at a complete loss, because he's clearly asked these guys to get vaxxed. He's, and all he cares about is trying to win. I would guess in his personal life, he might not be a big fan of being vaxxed. I don't know. And that's not the topic here. The topic is winning football games. So that's why I think it might have changed a bit as far as the feeling towards guys who ordinarily will, put themselves on the line to win football games. And now they won't get a shot to win football games.
I don't know if it has a deep impact in the locker room, though. Management, coaching staff,
yes,
100%. Now, maybe it divides the locker room if, okay, it's September 12th and Kirk Cousins isn't out there, the Bengals end up winning the game.
Yes.
Then maybe it becomes an issue in the locker room. I don't sense it's a strong issue right now in the locker room. But yeah, Zim, other coaches, the front office, yes, big time. Like, they're paying Kirk Cousins ungodly amounts of money, in large part because of availability. If he's not available, yes, it can derail things. Like, he misses a game, you end up with 9 wins instead of 10 or 11 wins. That's the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. Like, yeah, I mean, Zim is on edge all the time anyway. And so this adds to it. Now, Mark Wilf, Vikings owner, meets the media here in about 30 minutes. We, Channel 5, will have a presence there. I'm not physically going to be there in Eagan, but I'll be curious if Mark offers up any hints to this situation. Probably not. He'll be very careful with his wording, but I'll be curious to see his comments. But yeah, we know the pressure that Spielman and Zimmer are facing this year. Now, could it be a cop-out? If you're Zim at the end of the year, do you go to the Wilf family and say, I tried. I brought in Alan Page. I brought in John Randall, Dr. Sills. We have the best access to doctors, heck, in the world. I brought all these guys on, whether it was via Zoom or in person, to educate these guys. What the heck else could I do? They made their choice. Yeah, it's idiotic, but they made it. And what the heck can I do? And we ended up, going 9-8, and we missed the playoffs. Like, is that my fault? I'd be really curious in early January, if that ends up transpiring, how the Wilf family reacts. But, we're positive. Like, the clock is ticking. Like, they haven't missed the playoffs 2 consecutive years under Zim. If they do, I'm just not quite sure Zim is the head coach in 2022, which could be incredibly unfair. And that's why I think he's so pissed off.
All right, Doogie. Yesterday, I was all doom and gloom on this team after the vaccination things that happened over the weekend, and now Aaron Rodgers is back. So I'm just curious on your opinion. Phil was on the doom and gloom side with me, and for whatever reason, Judd was the most optimistic still on this Vikings team, which was a rarity for this show. So I guess just a question to you, after seeing what's happened now with these vaccination rates, with Dakota Dozier still getting run at the offensive line, Aaron Rodgers now back in Green Bay, do you still feel the Vikings have a still good chance to win the NFC North, or has your opinions on that changed in the last 72 hours or so?
Well, I mean, the Packers are rightfully so the division favorites. Now, do I think the Vikings end up with 10 victories? Yeah, I have them at 10-7. I think they do end up winning 10 games. But yeah, Green Bay, Declan, Green Bay to me is the favorite. As long as Rodgers is the quarterback, I can't bet against the Packers. But I like a lot of what the Vikings did in the offseason. A lot of one-year deals. I mean, that just signifies again how important this year is. They need to get Christian Darrisaw healthy. I'm there yesterday. I'm seeing him off to the side again. I see Wyatt Davis with his left ankle wrapped. He's off to the side. Now, I'm told Wyatt Davis is very minor, and there's actually some optimism that before this week is over, maybe it's Saturday at US Bank Stadium or Friday, but that Darrisaw may be back. And if it's not Friday or Saturday, it's early next week. But like you think about this team's left tackle missing rep after rep, yeah, it's concerning. It absolutely is. But I like a lot of what they did. I think the defense is going to be good. I know the defense had some hiccups yesterday. I talked to Sheldon Richardson after practice one-on-one yesterday. He told me Zim lit them up pretty good after practice. It was a rough day for the defense. But hey, like Kirk Cousins isn't out there throwing the ball. I think it's just a natural tendency to ease up a little bit. They thought they would be in pads. Like, that's a classic story where the NFL sends out a memo on June 3rd and somehow it got lost in translation. Can you imagine that conversation when Rick Spielman went to Mike Zimmer's office yesterday and said, "Hey, Mike, there was a clerical error. We messed something up. Hey, you know how you plan to wear pads today? You're not going to be in pads
today."
The
Chargers got pulled off the field after a certain amount of time practicing in full pads. They were pulled off the field and forced to go change out of full pads.
It's epic. So, like the Vikings weren't alone. I think a lot of NFL teams somehow, there's memo after memo, and they somehow had missed it that you needed to wait an extra day after the off day. So think about just every NFL team took Sunday off, then you come back Monday, but coming off the day off, you couldn't be right in pads. So they'll be in pads today, but that had to be priceless. The way Spielman delivered it to us, there were a few of us, he came down the steps right by where they do the outdoor press conferences, and he addressed us. He wouldn't do it on camera, by the way, because of course, me being the TV guy, I'm like, can we get him on camera? No, wouldn't do it on camera. But yeah, I mean, he was stuttering through it a little bit, struggled with the word obscure, was trying to come up with it, and yeah, he wasn't in a good spot, Spielman, yesterday. But that just adds to this team providing, fodder after fodder, storyline after storyline. But bottom line, I think they should be pretty good. It always comes down to availability, right? Like, can you promise me that Kirk Cousins, like he has been for the last handful of years, takes every snap or just about every snap, or if he sits out, it's week 17, it's a meaningless game, but that he doesn't miss games due to injury? If you can promise me that, I feel pretty good about them getting to double-digit victories. And Eric Hendricks doesn't miss 5 games, and Anthony Barr doesn't miss 15 games, and go up and down the list. But yeah, if they can maintain health, I feel pretty good about this team's chances, even with everything going on.
Doogie, before we get to Twins, I won't sound the breaking news alarmer for this, but Brian Murphy reporting he's breaking that a grand jury has indicted Jeff Gladney on 2 felony assault charges for the confrontation with his girlfriend. If he is convicted, the Vikings quarterback could be sentenced to 2 to 10 years in prison. He remains free on $10,000 bond pending his trial.
Yeah, I mean, the Vikings haven't planned yet. Today was the day, so Murph has been all over the Gladney situation for a while. I also didn't get people knocking Murph or knocking on Gladney's door. Last week. That's what you do in this business.
Murph,
like Paul McEnroe, the late great Paul McEnroe, my mentor, one of my mentors. Like, be where the story is. Paul McEnroe was one of the greatest investigative journalists in the country, heck, on this planet for decades, in large part because he would do stuff like that. He would talk to people that other people just couldn't get access to. So Murph did the right thing. He found
Demetrius Underwood. Mac did. He found him in a Philadelphia hotel, which is one of the most incredible stories that we don't have time for right now. Take us inside the the boardroom at Target Field, Derek Falvey, Thad Levine, and a bunch of cell phones. Let's start with Jose Barrios. What led up to the not surprising trade there, though? Did they circle back with him on a contract? Start with that one, and what took place right before the Barrios trade to the Blue Jays, Dukes.
Well, before I give you on Barrios, just one leftover note on Gladney.
Sure.
I'm still upset that they passed on the Utah cornerback who ended up in Chicago, who's like 2 years younger than Gladney. Like when guys are close, and Jalen Johnson was coming off a minor injury, but they had the medical reports on him. They felt comfortable enough, I think, taking him. They just viewed Gladney as a better prospect. Like in hindsight, they really messed up the Gladney pick. And even if the news didn't come down today, he still was staring at a multi-game suspension, not in camp. Like if you're a Vikings fan, don't expect anything from Jeff Gladney for the foreseeable future. Okay, on Barrios, no, it was about a 2-second conversation. I know Thad Levine was leading that charge to some extent, but it was very quick. I mean, Thad was distraught, didn't want to have to move Barrios, but Jose seems to be, clinging to the love of hitting the free agent market at 28 years old, winter of 2022. Now, could the Twins, we could argue this, Judd, if you're the Twins, if you had offered Jose Barrios the Zach Wheeler contract, or maybe even a little bit higher, tick higher, let's say 5 years, $120 million, does he really say no?
Does somebody come in with a contract that's basically the same?
Well, but I'm saying if the Twins made the offer now, let's say on July 28th, late last week before the deadline, the Twins were willing to do that deal right now.
Yeah.
He takes that, doesn't he?
But they wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it. No, yeah. That's my point. The Twins never came close to making Jose an offer that he couldn't turn down. And that would have been Zach Wheeler money, way above Lance McCullers junior money. And we can debate whether that would have even made sense. Like, you can argue Jose has hit his ceiling. Even though he's still young, he's not getting any better. He's good, but he's never going to be a superstar. He's never going to be great. So you don't pay a guy like that $24 million a year. So I understand that, but to answer your question, no, they never really re-engaged the Barrios camp on extension talks. So they came to the conclusion they can get more now than in the winter, than at the trade deadline next year, than if they had played this thing out next year, then tendered him a contract and landed a draft pick. With even the CBA expiring, I think that part of the CBA will probably still stay intact, that if you lose a free agent but you tender him a qualifying offer, you can end up with a really good draft pick. But the way they weighed it, with Woods Richardson, the pitcher, with Martin, the position player who looks like he's going to end up starting in center field initially here for Wichita, starting tonight or tomorrow. I know he's meeting the media tomorrow. He gets to Wichita. I think maybe even got there last night or over the weekend. Should be in the Wichita lineup tonight, but it sounds like he'll play center field initially, but could still end up at, maybe second base. But that the Twins viewed Austin Martin's bat as high upside, that they viewed Woods Richardson as a high upside arm. They view both guys. Now we can debate this, but they view both guys as top 50 prospects in the game, that the offer was just too good to pass up. I'm told that they had 4 different pretty good offers to choose from. The Padres were in it until the end. I don't have specifics on what the Padres were offering, but clearly the package that they preferred was Austin Martin and Woods Richardson.
Doogie, what about Michael Pineda, Andrelton Simmons? Were there any offers for either of those two guys? I'm shocked that they weren't able to move one of those two.
Yes and no. So yes on Pineda, no on Andrelton Simmons. They literally did not get one offer on Andrelton Simmons. It's sad. I mean, the Reds had scouted him. The A's had some interest, but I think in the end, the A's made some other moves, then said, hey, you know what? Is Andrelton Simmons better, or heck, markedly better than Elvis Andrus? Let's just keep rolling with Elvis at shortstop. It's not like Andrelton's going to help us that much. So the A's did not make an offer. The Reds did not make an offer. I guess they feel comfortable with Kyle Farmer at shortstop. So, yeah, not one offer on Simmons. But, yeah, if they wanted to trade Pineda, now the return would not have been great. But if they wanted to move Michael Pineda, they could have moved Michael Pineda. They have not engaged his camp on extension talks at all. But I think they do have interest after the season in re-signing him, that they would like Pineda in the 2022 rotation. He can also eat up some innings the rest of the way. they're watching innings very closely. Like Bailey Ober over the weekend in St. Louis was pulled after 4 innings again, just because if you look at his lack of work in 2020, and we can debate that point, but they're being very cautious. Now, I talked to Rick Knapp, the Rays AAA pitching coach, on the 2 guys they got for Nelson Cruz. He told me that they've been going with 6-man rotations, that those guys innings load-wise are not up there, that Rick Knapp feels like Joe Ryan and Drew Strotman can both pitch in September. And Joe Ryan of the 2 is probably closer to joining the Twins. Strotman had a little bit of a rough debut for the St. Paul Saints the other night, but that hopefully we see Joe Ryan in September. That would be my hope. But you still need a guy to eat up some innings, especially after you made the Jay Happ move, which I'm still shocked that they got anything for Jay Happ.
That was the most perplexing thing. Like, what are the Cardinals doing?
I have no idea. They also traded for John Lester, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Year.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, the guy the Twins got, who will be in their bullpen. I mean, he's in their bullpen. He was in the other day in St. Louis, Gant, and he'll be in their bullpen next year. I think he's a member of the Twins next year, that they tender him a contract.
Yeah.
I would have, if I'm St. Louis with his starting background, I would have felt better, even with his high walk numbers. I would have felt better throwing John Gant on the mound than Jay Happ. Just start Gant the rest of the way. That was a weird one.
And why, if you're the Cardinals, why wouldn't you aggressively go after Pineda then? Like, I would much rather have Pineda than Happ.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the Twins would have done that specific trade.
No, but I'm saying I might have done a better deal to the Twins if I'm the Cardinals for Pineda, who I actually like.
Well, I like him too.
Jay Happ, I don't think there's no there.
There is no there. After his first 4 starts, like, he literally has given up a run an inning. If you take out the first 4 starts, if you go back his last, 14 starts, it's literally like a run an inning. It's just about the numbers they blow you away. I'd also say the Cardinals don't really have a super realistic path to making the postseason. So, like, are you giving up a lot for a pending free agent when your chances of making the playoffs are 5%?
Then don't get Jay Happ, though. That's
that was the weird thing.
That's what's weird about it. Yeah.
Just keep Gant. I'm sure they didn't want to pay Gant whatever it is, even if it's $1.3 million. I'm sure they decided they weren't going to tender him a contract for next year. They didn't want Gant on their 40-man roster next year. So let's just free up that space right now.
Hey, last thing. Do you think now that Barrios is gone, Dukes, at some point in time here, probably once we hit the winter, that the Twins are going to circle back with the Buxton camp? And because there's just, if both of them get dealt here, that's hard to swallow. I get one of them. I don't love it, but I get it. But I got to think that you now go back to the Buxton camp with a reality check on your offer and up that thing $100 million over, let's say, 5 years.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yeah. I mean, for those watching on YouTube, I'm nodding my head. Yeah. Judd, I'm positive on this. They are going to re-engage the Buxton camp in extension talks. And yeah, I feel darn confident they are going to go up from that $80 million guaranteed. Now, whether he accepts, that remains to be seen. But, like, can I see a pathway to Buxton being here long-term after everything that took place last week? I can. Yeah, I really can. I would not be shocked if Buxton ends up, if the two sides end up coming to a happy medium.
Awesome stuff, Dukes. Thank you.
Okay. See you, boys.
You take care.
Thanks, man.